So, hello, welcome to our Cloud Robotics Working Group meeting. This is a general catch-up, anything that anyone wants to talk about, including but not limited to Cloud Robotics Working Group business. So I recently asked about IROS. I've been seeing more stuff about IROS. Am I now right in thinking that IROS has happened? Or is that happening this week or something and I'm still off?
Well, ROSCON is happening right now.
ROSCON.
Yeah, but I think IROS was last week.
I see.
But I think IROS was in Abu Dhabi or something like that, and
Yes.
ROSCON's in Denmark. So they used to be in the same spot, but.
So Giovanni, you're not going to ROSCON, even though it's just a little bit north from you?
No, I'm this week I'm on duty with my older daughter, so I cannot leave the house.
Makes sense.
She's not looking to enjoy ROSCON herself yet, then.
No, she's mostly trying to destroy my laptop most of the time.
Yeah. Cool. Well, it sounds like we've got a couple of events that maybe people in the community would be happy to talk about. We've also got, I mentioned last time that on December 16th, we'll have Tomoya Fujita coming to talk to us. And I've also recently started arranging with Julian Enoch a talk about Xeno, and I think it's Zeta goes with it. So that might be.
Scale, I think they're called, right?
Say again, please.
Isn't the company called Zeta Scale?
Oh.
Yeah, correct. So. Yeah, Zeta Scale.
Great. Yeah. So he has said he's happy to give at least one talk. It may need to be 2 talks. So I'm trying to arrange a good time with him. So hopefully we'll be getting more speakers. I think having a couple of speakers on was really, really good. It didn't leave much time to talk about Cloud Robotics Hub as expected, and that's fine because we'll have meetings without speakers. And I think getting the stuff on YouTube and telling people about it is great. So yeah, I'm definitely keen to get more people on. As I think I say every week, please sign up for the guest speaker sheet, etc.
So now I see a trend here. After we had Eric last time, we have quite a few talks about really the core problem, I think, of which is connectivity, because he was also the last talk he gave this Fogros 2, the one that is using this, that is not a VPN, that is his own proxy way of relaying ROS topics across distributed robots. And then we're gonna have now Xeno, which is also there. So it seems like an unsolved problem, or at least there are several possible solutions there, but we've been trying a few of those, but all of them have something that at least makes it a bit complicated to set up a really distributed application. And I remember something that popped up in one of the meetings previously, which was Christian, you were saying you're an expert of WebRTC, but you wouldn't want to promote it too much because you are very much involved with it. But I just wanted to say my 2 cents on it. I think you shouldn't have a problem with that. I think you should probably put a blog post out. I mean, that seems to be, you already have a blog post out on your website on it, but it seems to be really a no-brainer for video streaming that's the technology to use, at least for dashboards. I don't really know how it works. I imagine video compression is not a problem with applying AI after it. So I think you should use it. It could be used also when you have an AI receiving the stream on the other end, I guess, or am I mistaken? I don't know about this.
That's a very good question. So there's 2 questions if you want to do some sort of post-processing. One is, what's the type of client that has to hold the peer-to-peer connection? Because WebRTC, we're using it right here for this teleconferencing, right? So it was meant to be between browsers, and really browsers are the only ones that have really good and mature implementations of the WebRTC stack. And when I say WebRTC stack, what the first thing that you learn when you dive deeper into it is that WebRTC is not one thing. It's a hodgepodge of RFCs that have been implemented to various degrees by different browsers in different ways. And so it's you don't have to implement all of it. You don't have to use all of it. But if you want all of the quality, then you do. And then that gets to the second question, which is that gets to the question of how do you do it from an end device. So the difficulty with doing WebRTC for robots is that robots are not browsers, right? Some people have tried to run headless browsers on robots to get video streaming to work using WebRTC, and it usually failed. But there are now some backend libraries for WebRTC that you can use. I mostly use GStreamer. It's still very early, so it doesn't just work out of the box, which makes it quite involved for anybody who wants to implement it. So that makes it. But with that being implemented on the robot, you can stream into the browser. Now, if you want to do post-processing, you would have to be streaming between two end devices, right? So you would then on your cloud or wherever you want to do or edge device, wherever you want to do the processing, you would have to again implement like an end device WebRTC endpoint. So that's on the connectivity side and actually making the WebRTC work. Then the second question is, if you want to do post-processing on the video, one big concern will be to what extent the video compression will actually screw with your AI results, right? The issue there, of course, is that most people do AI now on neural networks, and neural networks are very incomprehensible, meaning you don't actually. If I showed you two pictures of seemingly the same thing, you might say, yeah, those are the same things. But one of them may work very well in a recognition, in a classification, and the other one may fail utterly, simply because some pixels are messed up together. And the thing with video compression, of course, is that one of the big features is that it will reduce image quality if the network is not good enough. So as a human, the optimization is sort of for human consumption. So as a human, you can still tell, oh, okay, that's Christian's hand that's waving there, even though you can't see every finger. But if you wanted to do post-processing on that may just fail, right? So it's a very interesting question. I'd love to actually see some research on that, because it's a very core problem for cloud robotics, really, right? If you want to do like these NN applications, typically you can't run them on the robot, or at least not at a pretty big scale. So it's a very reasonable question to ask, whether like how these two technologies may work together or not.
Thank you. Yeah, I was. That's why I was wondering, and I was wondering whether you had tried it or not.
I have not yet. If anybody wants to try something, I'd be happy to support that and see how we can collaborate on it, because I am very curious about it. But yeah, I think the best practice, just in terms of practically what people do, is they do recognition on the robot, and then they may. So one thing that some of my now talking about transitive, right? Some of my users do is they do classification on the robot, and then they publish in ROS a marked up image, where they have like the rectangles, for instance, of what they've recognized, and then they will stream that for remote inspection. But that doesn't obviously harness the compute in the cloud. The other reason actually not to do it is because you may know, NVIDIA pushing their Jetson devices, and they're becoming very prevalent. A lot of people seem to be using those. And with that, you have a GPU on the robot, essentially, not a super powerful one, but you can do some recognition there. That's how people seem to be doing it these days.
Yeah, you can run, or you can do specialized models, exactly, and those are a bit smaller, and you can put them on the devices themselves. I remember back in the days we had tried to, we had used Janus with GStreamer on the robot, and then we had Janus as a sort of web access to the WebRTC stream, and then we also had attached a little AI model that would do just object detection on the Janus side. But that wasn't ideal, and it was really just a proof of concept. So and it was a long time ago. It was like 2018, I think. So I haven't done it in a while.
Yeah.
Would you see a lot of advantages of using video over just snapshots every second or something?
Yeah, people do that too. Every second might be okay. You will still spend way more bandwidth than if you did video streaming. In that blog post that Giovanni was referring to, I was comparing all of the different ways people do video streaming from robots, and the first approach most companies use is they literally just send JPEG snapshots 5 times a second or something like that. So they reduce their frame rate a little bit to make it palatable, but even then, it's very it's a huge waste of bandwidth, because with video compression you would get much better compression, and the intuition is clear, right? Like if you look at my video and I'm sitting still, this whole stuff in the back, it's not changing at all. So why would you resend that all the time? And if you send it at 2 separate frames, there's not even like the typical zip kind of compression of detecting duplicates, or it's not even there. Whereas in video compression, obviously, you just send the diff. So yeah, it's not very efficient. But if you do want to do AI in the cloud, that might be the right compromise, right? Like do it less often, but then on full scale images, where you really know that every pixel is accurate, at least to the level that your camera will give it to you.
And going back to the WebRTC thing, I don't know if you would like to do a new blog post or just refer to but I think our blog on Cloud Robotics Hub would need a blog post about WebRTC. I would say we should talk about it, and maybe after we see also Zeno, after we see Tomoya, maybe we could also do a recap blog post about all these connectivity approaches that are there, because bottom line, as Eric was saying the last time, DDS per se seems to have a bit of trouble, most of all because there's different vendors, of course, but also because there's different versions, and it's not really easy to set it up across sites. So that could be something I would say, to me at least, is the most interesting thing of cloud robotics at the moment, because it's the thing I struggle with the most, to get a really good connectivity going on that supports everything, actions, services, and topics, of course.
I think that makes sense. I think one blog post that we could write is, because there's not one answer, right? Like depending on what you want to do, you actually should use different modalities, right? So WebRTC is great for video streaming, and it's UDP, so you're willing to drop frames. So the unreliableness of UDP is a feature. But if you were using it for something else, you may not want to do that. So we could potentially, maybe we should wait until after the Zeno talk, and then we could write a blog post where we essentially outline, the pros and cons of when do you use DDS remotely, when do you use something like MQTT or Zeno. Both of them are basically they're very similar, right? They're pub sub meant for cross-device communication. And when would you use a peer-to-peer connection like WebRTC? That might make for a very nice kind of blog post that kind of goes along with this desire that we heard from our survey takers of, tell me what I should do, like give me some guidance on when to use what.
Mm-hmm.
Good, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, just the connecting robots is hard. a big takeaway. I mean, when we would do demos, would you take the robot and try and set it up on your Wi-Fi? No, you just take a router that the robot's already connected to. Like that's how you do a robot demo in the field. You take your connectivity with you, which is so not how it should be. And if we want people to use the cloud, or they want to use the cloud, connectivity is going to have to get solved.
So that's an interesting additional aspect that we may also want to touch on in the blog post if and when we write it, which is this how the deployment context matters so much. Mm-hmm. I regularly talk with people who want to use WebRTC offline. They have like robots out in the boonies with no internet anywhere in sight. Maybe not even electricity. I was at Robo Business last week, and somebody raised that question: how would you deploy your robots without electricity? And the speakers stumbled at first. I was like, wait, no electricity? Oh, you mean like really no? Like, okay, everything's battery driven, and you have to be completely off the grid, so to speak. Because then it's very different, right? Then actually, you can still use WebRTC, but then you have to bring your own signaling server. Like you have to have some sort of local mesh network with at least one server in some capacity on that network, which then is yet a different way of solving connectivity. At Savvyog, what we did was, and a lot of companies do that, or people do that, is we just ran an access point on the robot itself, so we could switch the robot into access point mode, where it would accept incoming connections rather than connecting to a Wi-Fi endpoint, and then you could use your phone to connect directly to the robot and do like teleoperation that way.
But that's nice for debugging, but not really best practice architecture.
You mean for actual usage in the field?
For deploying a robot, you don't want it to be running around with its own access point that anybody can connect to.
So for the actual deployment, like activity, like mapping, and which is sort of the main thing that you need to do with your robot when you deploy it, it's actually not a bad idea. It's not a solution for the long-term operation, for sure.
Right. That's more what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
Yes. For long-term operations. And I'm thinking that because you went to Robo Business, but I went to RobopsCon, which is very small. Sponsored by In Orbit. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Florian Pestoni and Joe Wiechek, formerly of Brain Corp. Anyway, it was pretty well attended, but it's a bunch of people trying to do fleet management essentially, and they also struggle with connectivity in fleet management, even in a warehouse or a factory environment. So, this connecting the robot to anything else is not trivial, and all the DDS stuff makes it hard for our lives as developers. But there's whole other layers of the factory owner won't let you put in the Wi-Fi. How do you deal with it? And that it's a concern if you want to use cloud in there, because cloud requires regular connectivity, at least how we're typically imagining it. I don't know if there'd be some other way where the latency of getting back to the dock and then using the cloud is really worked in yet.
Yeah, this is a topic that comes up everywhere all the time. There's different aspects to it. There's my robot has lost connectivity and we need to reach him, and the robot needs to realize that he has lost connectivity. And then some people implement sort of a fail-safe mechanism where if the robot has a problem and it hasn't moved for 5 minutes and it is unconnected, meaning that it called for help but it couldn't get help because it's disconnected, then it will do some sort of fail-safe, go back to dock. And then usually when you deploy a robot at a site, the first thing that you do is you try to find a place where you can put the dock where you have good Wi-Fi, right? I mean, obviously it's difficult to find a good place for the dock because it has to be somewhat out of the way. It needs to be near power and so forth. But then on top of it, you also want to have good Wi-Fi. And then the other aspect is often people deploy dual mode, like they have an LTE or a 5G modem. but then also Wi-Fi, and 5G can be pretty expensive if you send a lot of data over it. So then the big question becomes, what do you send over which connection? And so, for instance, one thing that a lot of people do, and I think In-Orbit does that too, is syncing back files to the cloud only happens when you're on the dock, meaning when you're on Wi-Fi. The other benefit is while you're on the dock, you're usually idle.
Yeah.
But there's even then, right? Like these are best practices for robots that operate unsupervised. I now speak with a lot of people. For instance, I was talking to Canvas Robotics at Robo Business. They're doing drywall finishing. And they're, like many other construction robotics companies, actually have a deployment model where there's a supervisor with the robot all the time. So there you could actually have, they in fact, so Dusty Robotics is the other company that I know well because I used to work with them. And they describe their product as actually as more of an appliance. They call it a field printer sometimes. So the model is you could totally use it offline. You have to have somebody nearby to supervise and give it commands. But when it's done, you pack it up, you ship it home. So you don't actually need the cloud. Obviously not relevant for this group, but what I'm saying is, yet another layer of...
Well, right, it's kind of become the solution because connectivity is unreliable.
In that case, so they could have cloud connectivity. That's not the problem. It's just that their deployment model requires a person there for other reasons anyway.
Sure, but if the cloud connectivity was easy, then you would do things a little differently. Partly because it's not easy. These are the solutions you find, and yes, you need someone there for some of these operations. But it's just a challenge for bringing the cloud in. Is a super unreliable connection, and it's super difficult to set up. And I mean, even you're talking about 5G LTE being expensive. We were talking, last time with Fogros, and they're like doing multiple 5G LTE to get reliability. I mean, it's just and as soon as there's a bunch of robots using that, then that availability goes down. And I don't know. It's like, are we trying to solve the right problem? But it feels like there's so much the cloud could enable, but it can't because no one can connect to it reliably. Yeah,
that's a good point. And I guess in their case, it was the example where Eric was talking about that channel bonding was a self-driving application, I think, right? Where in some sense, the value that you are bringing from the robot is high enough where you can justify the cost for it. That's not the case for every robot.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, a lot of those ongoing costs, and even some of consumer robots trying to run models on the device becomes a lot of engineering effort to keep your costs down. You can't just, throw a GPU at it. Like now the product doesn't sell because you had to add $100 to the cost, double it or whatever. And those are situations where having some cloud would help, but then now reliability of the connection, what does the robot do when it stops? Does the consumer understand that its behavior is different because their Wi-Fi sucks and they should upgrade their home Wi-Fi? There's just it gets into a really complicated set of trying to educate your consumer on why the robot is behaving the way it is, instead of just not using the cloud and kind of known behaviors.
On the wrap-up blog post, I thought that was a good idea. This was a while back in the discussion, but the like a recap blog post after having a few talks, I think is a good idea. And I also thought we should have a connectivity tag for blog posts. That seems like a simple thing to put in.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that I was thinking of that would be good is more in the line of the posts you have done, Mike, on your website, more about what is cloud robotics and what it is used for. Because, for instance, again, I see some people are, mainly the fleet robotics people are building dashboards. And I guess that's really the one of the big values Chris has a nice blog post also why you want to do it with cloud and you don't want to do I don't know ROS bridge connectivity directly to the robot, because basically you need a public endpoint. There's no NATing and all these sort of things. And I think that could also be something that we should talk about, because as I was saying, I see lots of dashboards. Then there's the connectivity problem, which implies typically, sorry about my daughter, which implies typically debugging on top of just having a dashboard. And typically when you're doing robotic debugging, you start having heavier topics that you might want to visualize, for instance, point clouds, as we all know. And so somehow, and then there's all the AI, LLM, all the additional real kind of things that you could do with. I would like to also have maybe a blog post, or maybe even just an organization of the technologies that we have on the resources pages that somehow reflects what the purpose is of the cloud robotic application that you're building, because it's still a bit we still do not define it really much, and we still do not say what kind of different cloud robotics application can be built. And yeah, I see a lot of people doing fleet management now, which seems to be one of the no-brainer or most common cloud robotic application out there, actually.
Yeah, that might be useful, right? Like a classification of what's like practically how do people use the cloud. I'm just like repeating to see whether I understood correctly. Where with fleet management being obvious, but then there's more, there's other efforts that may be happening more in academia right now, like Eric's work on FOCROS, which utilizes cloud compute. Yeah, I think that'll be good.
Something that we could generally do, excuse me, I think, was it last meeting, I mentioned that the resources page didn't have many resources on it yet. And I think I left it sounding like it was all on you, Christian. And I A, want to correct that, because it's not. And B, I want to see how we can add more. And I know I've added the link to make a GitHub issue now, but I think we in this group could think of a lot of resources amongst ourselves to put on there. That's something that I'm planning to do next. So I wanted to bring it up and say, as you're browsing around and you hit a good site, please note it down somewhere, suggest it to the rest of us. Let's get some resources on the page that we built the hub for.
Yeah, since you mentioned it, I rediscovered something that I saw in the past. We have a new intern, and we're trying to build a cloud robotics application where we have a small homemade dashboard for controlling a remote robot. And we were looking at the different connectivity options that we have. We have VPN, works quite well. We have Xeno, works quite well. And then we wanted to try out Eric's solution because we didn't know it too well. And then this intern found out again ROS board, and then it was extended by, I don't remember which company now. Yeah, exactly. To have a sort of a client for ROS board that does it in a different way somehow, not just using a web browser to connect to the ROS board server, but actually having a Python client that can stream. And we tried it out to play a bit, but that's, for instance, would be yet an alternative way of building dashboards or building things. What I found out that was we tried to use it in a different way that it was not intended to. So I wanted to have the ROS board server in the cloud and use the client of the ROS board on the robot to stream just the topics that I wanted. But it turned out it didn't work as nicely as the way it was intended to be used, with the server on the robot itself. And I was really wondering, well, why? But anyways, just to mention, that's somehow a technology that is out there, works decently in at least in some use cases. But it's we could mention it also there.
Yeah, that actually, I guess I can give a little update in that context. I totally forgot, but you all know about transitive and how it works. And one thing that we sometimes get is some very early users who don't have anything yet, right? So we tell them, yeah, you can integrate our video streaming in your dashboard, and they go like, which dashboard? So what we're actually doing, I have a new employee who's working on that. It's an open source dashboard. We call it Transact. So it's you can really think of it as an alternative to ROS board, with the big difference that architecturally we're completely different, right? Like we do not require a direct connection between the browser and the robot, which is how ROS board works using, I think they use ROSBridge, right? And so, yeah, you don't need any VPN or anything like that. So Giovanni, maybe your intern will be interested in looking at that. And, it's open source, so thoughts and contributions and everything would be awesome. But even just your opinion or his in the context of what he's looking at would be great.
Thank you. I mark it down. I will definitely take a look at it.
And it's super early work in progress, but the current version, works, and it's completely not documented. So please reach out if you need help. But it's functional.
Excellent. Thank you.
So far I've noted down a few of the applications and resources. I think one of the, I don't know if I'd say mistakes, but it was certainly slow, was trying to do all the work in meetings, like processing the survey results. I think we spent a long time processing them because we were trying to do it all in meetings. I think what I'm likely to do is take the resources I've noted down so far and just put it in a PR that we can all review together. So yeah, if you've got thoughts on that, but also there's the follow-on from that is a more general topic of how's the working group doing? Is there anything that you think could be improved, etc.? So I guess a kind of mini retro, but just like any feedback, comments you've got now or privately.
What's your take? I kind of want to hear from you first, because I feel like Giovanni and I have been doing a lot of talking, but like how do you feel about the group?
I'm generally happy because we have I think we've basically followed the roadmap so far. We've done the survey and got some results out that we shared with people. We've even built a website, which I didn't envision in its current form at the beginning. I think what we've built is better, and I like that we're building up. The regular meetings are going well, and I like that we're getting speakers in. I think I could have done better about that in the past, but I think it's improving now. So that one's on me. But in general, I think it's going well, and I just want to make sure that I'm not alone in that. And if there's anything that can be improved, I do want to hear about it. But yeah, don't feel like you have to say anything. Like I'm not trying to put you all on the spot.
I'm mostly waiting to give others a chance, but no, I concur. Actually, I'm very happy about the talks, because the other thing that happened was, well, two things, right? One is these talks to us, they're a little bit like papers that you publish. I mean, once you've published a paper, you realize, man, this is really, this is now done. This is on record. I can refer to it for the rest of my life, right? And maybe that paper will not be relevant when I'm 80, but for the next little, whatever, 5-10 years, this is something I can refer to. It's really like it's like you put the foundation for your house down. It's ready. You can build on it. It's a contribution. It's something that can't really be taken away from you anymore. And I feel like with these talks, it's similar, right? Like we now have them on record. We have it, and thank you for recording all of that and cutting it out into YouTube. This is a real, if somebody asks us, so what has the Cloud Robotics group done lately? And we can refer to it, and we say like, well, and the website, the same thing, right? Like we put a website together and we invited these speakers, and here's the recording, and anybody who wants to learn about cloud robotics, here they can do that. So I think that's really great. And then the second part of that is the attendance is much higher when we have speakers, which I think makes me happy, because it means that people, care about it. It's not just the four of us talking among each other. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I was going to comment similarly, Christian, that is it because it's ROSCON week, or is it that we don't have a speaker? Is that why it's just 4 people? Because the speakers do seem to be well attended, which is great.
I'm mostly waiting for the breaks between my little Julia shouting. I think we're doing okay. I also like the fact that get more people when the speakers are there. I also second what Christian was saying, that the results are there. But I also agree with Mike that we should try to be doing more work offline, because the meetings are in general short. We sometimes don't have an agenda of things to decide or discuss, and when we have a speaker, we basically are not able to do anything else. So maybe we should try to. I know we're all busy, and I know, but maybe we should try maybe we should try to somehow work offline a bit more, and then collaborate a bit more offline, and then just take decisions during the meetings.
On that note, actually, I would like to thank you all for helping build the hub. If I put a PR out, it's normally merged very quickly. So it's great to have people to rely on to build us up. Working offline, I do agree. I think we kind of have to, and I think we pretty much agreed to it when we changed our format to more of a meetup discussion type thing instead of a working group doing work type format. If that's a good summary. I think at that point, if the meetings are we're catching up and talking the latest news, then the only time we can do work is offline. Yeah, so that's pretty much my thought on it. Maybe there's better ways we could do that. I don't know, but I'll leave a space there.
Yeah, I have to apologize. I really don't have a lot of time offline right now. I still wanted to do, I still want to add the great publication list that Eric has to our resource page, so that we can sort of complete that merge between his awesome cloud robotics and ours. And I still haven't gotten to it. I mean, I'd love to say I'll do it this week, but currently it's not looking like I will have a lot more time. So yeah, as much as I agree that we should or need to do a little bit more offline work, unfortunately I don't have much to offer right now. Is there anything specific, Giovanni or Mike, that you're thinking of, like what we need to do offline? I mean, we talked about the resource page, so that's a good one. Anything else that you're thinking of?
No, I was just thinking about the blog post, and maybe we should discuss what types of new content or new blog posts we should be working on, maybe together or maybe singular.
That's a great idea. I was distracted from saying by that idea. I really don't want you to feel pressured or feel bad about having not got to it. I think when we get it, that's great. But this is all voluntary work from everyone here, and appreciate you taking it on when you can. I like the idea of having some way of discussing what to do. I mean, if we have 2 or 3 speakers in a row, that leaves us approximately 5 minutes for discussing hub stuff in a month and a half, which is maybe we do need a an async channel to talk about blog posts and so on.
I mean, this is why I was throwing a couple of ideas of blog posts that we could have, because our page says frequently updated blog. So we should comply.
We could make that occasionally updated blog.
I see.
It's one solution. No, that's good. I don't have a good idea of what that offline channel is. Maybe we can discuss things through GitHub issues, but I like the idea. It's gotten me thinking, so I'll keep thinking after the meeting on that.
Issues is a good way. I could post a couple of issues that are blog post ideas or blog post titles, and then we could discuss.
That'd be great.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, I like that. I'm over here reviewing some of the notes I took from RobopsCon, and one thing that keeps sticking out is a little bit the make versus buy. And it seems like a lot of people in the robotics space are making over buying, if you will, for connectivity. And obviously this focus was on fleet management kind of software. But cloud robotics is the same. And I feel like a lot of the semi-interested queries we got early on when we were starting were people that just wanted us to build them a tool so they didn't have to make one in some ways. But it wasn't quite clear exactly what they wanted from it, if it existed out there and so on. But yeah, I think about that a lot. The young people coming out, they know how to look stuff up. Oh, there's a GitHub repo, I can go do this. And the value of experience of having set up a robot, done the connectivity problems, seems to get missed a lot of early iterations. And I don't know if that's a problem that we could address with a blog post, or if a blog post makes that problem worse. But that sort of experience building up these complicated systems is not always communicated to the wider community, especially to new beginners. And I would say the non-technical business people that are funding some of these ideas.
I'm really interested in what you said, that at RobopsCon they were talking about make versus buy. That's literally the title of my last blog post, and it was more on the fleet management side. Do you remember who at RobopsCon was specifically talking about it?
Yeah, let me look. I think it was a panel with, they titled it, "It Takes a Village." That was Florian Pestioni. Let's see, I have the other name here somewhere. Oh, come on. Unfortunately, they did not put their speaker titles on the webpage. There are two other guys on the panel. One was Michael Bokut from, just got acquired in February, what are the Camline, formerly Romeric. And then the last guy was with Main Street Robotics. They do calibration for all kinds of systems, kind of an offline, automatic, intrinsic, extrinsic calibration software. And yeah, so it's not just fleet management, but also things like calibration. Like you could do it, and then once you have to do it at scale, it becomes really different and difficult. And some of the things they were lamenting was how many of these problems in robotics are still problems because we insist on paying a new grad or an intern to look into it when we should just buy the solution. And obviously, as you all know, you usually have a really small budget when you start a robotics project because no one believes that you can actually do it. So, part of it's our own problems. But
yeah, this happens a lot. Like so often when my sort of stereotype view, this is not true for all of them, but the majority of robotics companies, they grow to a certain stage just using SSH and ROS. Right? They work on that prototype. It takes them a year to get an MVP out of the door. And of course, robotics is hard, right? So it totally makes sense. And then they build a second and a third. And then at one point they realize, well, we need to scale. We need some sort of tooling around it. If they're smart enough, they will directly go to the web. Sometimes they try to build RQT tools, or they do Arvis over VPN and stuff like that. But eventually they realize they need web tooling. And then what happens is they ask around in the company and they ask, who here knows anything web? And you hear crickets, right? Because roboticists, they hate JavaScript. Surprisingly, there's a real dislike for JavaScript. They like, C++ and Python, maybe Rust. And so nobody really knows it. And then oftentimes they hire somebody. Now, hiring people with web experience or cloud experience and robotics experience is virtually unheard of. There's very few people who have that. So, and then in comparison, there is a ton of people who have done cloud or web. And so they tend to end up hiring one of these. And these people often come in thinking they know exactly what they're talking about. So they try to apply, what they learned about the cloud to robotics. Many of them often enough, they make the mistake of thinking that the robot is really just a server on wheels. And that's very wrong because it's a client, and you have to realize that it has to be a client, not a server. But if you're holding that picture upside down, you're in for a wild ride where you're wasting 6 months of your life. And yeah, the technologies don't quite apply, right? Like in the cloud, connectivity is not an issue. Your data center servers, they are sometimes in the same rack, whatever, right? You don't have to worry about that. And then they usually fail miserably. Yeah, all of these pitfalls, I think, are all of them lend themselves to blogging, and sounds like that's what
I really love this, Chris. The robot is a client, is not a server. It's a really nice. We should make it a blog post title. It gives somehow the result of the experience of somebody who's been building distributed robotic applications for a while.
Yeah, I agree. I heard that phrase and thought the same thing. That's the title of a post about this. And yeah. And how much can we do with resources of guiding people to understanding the problem, not so much like, here's the script you run and now you have everything working. As much as I like those sorts of websites when I'm trying to build stuff, also being able to have something that we can share beyond just developers. I think there's a lot of problem convincing the people holding the money to see how complex the problem is.
Good point.
I imagine that part of that blog post would be, here's some stuff that you can do. It's not all doom and gloom. There's some stuff out there, and that can go on the resources page as well. If connectivity is the problem that everyone is having, then that should probably be our biggest section of, here's what's available and here's what we recommend.
Yeah, I guess the other thing to me is that it's not, I feel the outcome is, it's not going to be as simple as just buying one thing or buying a person. Like it's going to take a little more. There aren't turnkey solutions out there for your problem.
Yep.
And turnkey developers. I mean, like Christian was saying, that if you only know one part of it and you try and add a robot, it's just different. And it's similar, I've been focusing more on the DevOps side, and it's similar with DevOps. You got DevOps people, and that's very different than a robot. Write a unit test, that's great. Now write a unit test for stochastic algorithm, and it's a different beast. Like you have to have a different attitude going at it, and Yeah, it's similar on this cloud side, and I can see that, and I can see my inclination to just make things because I like that will get me into trouble. It's a bigger problem than just I can solve by myself.
I think we have the post half written already from this meeting.
It's great.
Something that it's only just this is a complete change of topic, by the way. So if you've got more to say, please jump in. But I realized that we've not actually looked at whether there have been new survey responses. And that is probably a good idea to do. So I'm just going to... I can't even remember how to access it.
I see
There we go.
37 responses, but I don't remember how many we had before. Let me see. Are they dated at all? Just go to the last one.
So I can count that we had 36 before.
Okay. So
from the hub site, if I've added that up, right? Yeah, 36. So we've had a new response. So maybe it's still too early to go and change all our results up.
I can project it here so we can look at it together though. Oops, wait. We're recording, right?
Yes.
Okay, then I will not show the email address because we said we wouldn't share that. But yeah, 2 to 10 robots, robots group segregation. I mean, each client has his robots. Okay. Yeah, I think that's similar to sometimes as a robotics as a service company, you have multiple customers where you have multiple robots on one site, and of course you have different customers, so you want to split them up a little bit. This person doesn't say in what capacity they want to segregate. In fleet management, obviously, you have to do that so that some of your customers only see their own robots, or maybe even only the robots of their site, if there's multiple deployment sites or any other such grouping. But it's not clear that that's what they meant here. It could also be a network segregation thing, because a lot of companies put their robots onto VPN. And then for security reasons, you may want to have different VPNs for different customers or for different sites. So not quite clear what they mean here, but that's what they said. Best practices, yes. We've heard that before. And they actually recommend DDS and eProsima. Good. Missing questions. Is there a best practice to deploy multiple robots in big robotics companies? If yes, what are the best practices?
Interesting. So that's more of a deployment application.
But what does he mean by deploy multiple robots? Deploy in the sense of, so one thing that people talk about is deployment management in robotics is just making sure that they get updates, over-the-air updates, deployment management, checking which version runs where, versioning, all of that. But here it's when you say deploying multiple robots, that sounds more like actually the process of shipping them, setting them up, bringing them out into the field, which is a problem in by itself for sure, right? This whole process flow of how do you
get it on the network?
How do you get it on the network? Yeah. How do you map? How do you share maps between robots? Why do you how do you even unbox the robot, right? A lot of companies, like most companies, they will fly out to receive their robot there. They will ship the robot using like a logistics company, and then they send an employee there to unbox it and set it up, turn it on. But if you want to do that at scale, that doesn't really work. So you would rather make it easy for your customer to do it themselves. So not quite clear what they mean here. They did leave their email address though, and I'm not going to show it because of the video, but we could reach out and ask some follow-up questions, or actually invite them to join us here.
Is there anything in the any other comments box?
Yes, he said, "Have a nice day."
It's a nice
Which is
note to end on.
appreciated, but not actionable right now.
Well, seemed to fit the mold of better documentation needed.
Yeah, which I also kind of read ties back into, I'm trying to build this myself, which is like, maybe that is who a lot of our audience is, but again, I don't know a turnkey solution, so better documentation isn't going to provide you a better turnkey solution. Like,
right, yeah. I happen to know who this is. I mean, I recognize the name. They actually started using Transitive and reached out. I can probably ping him fairly casually on Slack and ask. Should I invite him to join us here, or ask his inclination whether he'd be up for that?
Yeah, please do. If we can hear about the problems and guide the group towards helping him and people like him, then great.
Okay, I'll do that.
We are 2 minutes before the end, so I think it's good time to wrap up. Next session again will be another general purpose catch up, talk about the hub, etc. Unless I can get a guest speaker in, at which point I'll let you all know through the normal channels. So it was great getting some feedback. It sounds like we've got a plan to write some more posts and use the GitHub issues to as an async channel for discussing what needs to be put on the site. And again, if you're looking around and you find resources that are useful, keep track of them. We'll put them on the board. I've noted down the ones mentioned in the meeting, which is basically ROSboard and its extension, Transact, and FogROS2. And there's a few applications that we can group things by as well. So let's get some more frequent blog updates and some resources on the page. Sounds like a plan to me.
One last thought on that topic. Giovanni, you mentioned you had an intern looking at these things. If he's going to write up some sort of report at the end, maybe we could turn that into a blog post too.
Yeah. I'll definitely think about that. I don't know what we will really try out. Maybe we will even work towards a bit of a more formal academic publication, and in that case, we will just put a summary as a blog post.
Perfect.
I think we're about to get kicked anyway. So thank you all and see you next time.
thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.